So, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, honorable experts and guests, today the long-awaited start of the International Interdisciplinary Conference Sketch a Subculture. The most significant discussion issue for experts, scientists, and researchers today is the phenomenon of subculture that has expanded across the entire globe over the last century. Overall, everyone encounters subcultures in one way or another. And due to the fact this phenomenon is widespread but little studied, the conference Sketch a Subculture was organized. And I'm definitely pleased to welcome everyone to the first discussion panel of the international conference Sketch a Subculture, arranged by the European Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. So the key discussion points of the first panel are going to be as follows. The first one, the difference between subculture and religion. What are the specific elements that shape each institution? And the second, the use of religion by other social institutes like business, politics, etc., for their own purposes. Religion transformation from divine transcendence to the universal society based on techno-ideological principles. And let me please pay your attention to the fact the topic of the panel is a question but not a statement. So overall, the discussion panel today is attended by scientists and experts from Italy, Ukraine, and the USA. And I'm sincerely honored to be a moderator on this discussion panel. I'm Iryna Lopatiuk, and please let me introduce our speakers. So Dr. Massimo Introvigne, Italy, professor, sociologist of religion and intellectual property attorney, a founder and the managing director for the Center of Studies of New Religions. He was the representative of combating racism, xenophobia, and discrimination, with a special focus on discrimination against Christians and members of other religions of the OSCE, academician of European Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Welcome, Professor Massimo Introvigne. The next speaker is Dr. Oleg Maltsev, Ukraine, author, criminologist, psychologist, photographer, investigative journalist. He is an academician of Ukrainian Academy of Sciences and European Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, founder and director of the Memory Institute, head of Expeditionary Corps. He is an author of numerous books in the areas such as applied history, sociology, depth psychology, philosophy, criminalistics, criminology. He has been conducting field research with the Expeditionary Corps in many countries for more than 6 years to explore on what levels and how people are shaped by cities. He is an editor of several interdisciplinary peer-reviewed journals. Welcome, Dr. Maltsev. Our next guest and dear speaker is Dr. Lucien Oulahbib, France. Writer, lecturer, sociologist, political scientist, academician of European Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. He is the chief editor of scientific journal Dogma. Dr. Lucien spent many years working together with French thinker Jean Baudrillard. He is the author of numerous scientific papers and books on French nihilism and Neo-Leninism, radical Islamism, anti-Americanisms, and anti-Semitism. Our next dear speaker is Professor Ludmila Filipovic, Ukraine. She is the religious scholar, head of the Department of Philosophy and History of Religion and Institute of Philosophy by G.S. Skovoroda, the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. She is the professor of National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, vice president of the Ukrainian Association of Religious Studies, executive director of the Center for Religious Information and Freedom of the Ukrainian Association of Religious Studies. Our next guest and expert is Paul Rhoads, the USA. He is an American painter living in France since 1990, student of students of Hans Hofmann and Marcel Duchamp. He is also the conceptor and the editor-in-chief of the Vance Integral Edition, the complete works of Jack Vance. He is the composer, and you too, Paul Talk. He is the author of Thoughts on Jack Vance and What is Art. We're pleased to greet you. And one more, our dear speaker is Dr. Marco Andreacchio, France. He is independent scholar, educator, and author of works in political philosophy. Andreacchio's research spans from senior Japanese philosophical classics to Western counterparts. He has taught at various higher education institutions and published systematically on problems of political philosophical nature, most notably on Dante Alighieri. And let me please deliver just a few words about the reference terms of this panel. So, each speaker holds the opportunity to answer 2 questions formulated and presented to the speakers in advance. So please limit the extent of your answers up to 8-10 minutes, no longer, please. So to begin with, we shall start the discussion on the first issue, and afterwards, each expert will have the opportunity to express his personal views on the second issue. Therefore, I suggest we may start the discussion. And let me kindly remind you, the question number one is the difference between subculture and religion. What are the specific elements and that shape each institution? And to begin with, I would like to give the floor to Professor Massimo Introvigne. So please, dear Professor, you're welcome.
Thank you. Let me start by sharing a personal story. Some time ago, visiting a sort of a new age community, I told them they were part of a subculture, and I realized it was a faux pas. They had been deeply offended because they regarded a subculture as something bad, perhaps even criminal. It's the sub in subculture which sounded to them like substandard or perhaps sublegal. Well, I should tell you they were not entirely wrong because the first important books on the subject of subcultures produced in the United States were about marginal and sometimes criminal subcultures. And so the word subculture was, so to speak, born under a cloud to identify groups on the margin of the society. But on the other hand, that's an old-fashioned use of the word subculture, because today we use subculture in sociology without any value judgment. Of course, there are criminal subculture, but we talk of a great number of subculture, some of them playing a very positive role in society. So definitely there is nothing wrong or disreputable in being part of a subculture today. Coming to the question, I believe a subculture is still defined by the majority of sociologists dealing with subcultures as something non-institutional. So religions are mostly institutional. So it wouldn't be appropriate to say that Roman Catholicism is a subculture. It's an institution, well organized, and you are a member of the Roman Catholic Church if you have been baptized into the Roman Catholic Church and you are in the registers of your parish. So that's not a subculture, just as a political party is not a subculture. You become a member of the party by buying a card of the party, or Microsoft or another company is not a subculture. But in religion, there are subcultures. So within Catholicism, which is a very large institution, some people may network between themselves, perhaps because they are interested in a special mystic, say Charles de Foucault, and they come together, they discuss informally, and they acquire certain habits and lifestyle, and the word lifestyle is important here. So they may be a subculture of followers of a certain mystic within Catholicism, and certain religious phenomena are non-institutional. New Age is not an institution. You are not baptized into the New Age. You don't buy a card as a New Ager. So we can say that New Age is a subculture. And I will conclude this short answer by insisting again on the word lifestyle. Luigi Bersano is a sociologist at University of Torino. I have worked with, we have co-authored several books, but he has insisted in books not written with me on the connection between subculture and lifestyle. What is a subculture? And he is a sociologist of religion. It's a group of people sharing a certain lifestyle. And lifestyles are increasingly important in our society. And again, not all Catholics or all Muslims or all Protestant or all Russian Orthodox share the same lifestyle. These institutions are just too big. But within these institutions, there may be groups of people who come to share a similar lifestyle and constitute a subculture. So, short answer to your question, subculture and religions are different, but there are forms of religiosity, not religion like the New Age, that may be subculture. And within the large umbrella of the religious institutions, subcultures characterized by a specific lifestyle can flourish.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for your speech. And I believe it's high time of giving the floor to our next speaker. So Dr. Oleg Maltsev, please, you're welcome.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen.
Вот очень приятно иметь такое, большое количество очень уважаемых спикеров.
It's a pleasure to be in the circle of numerous, very well-esteemed speakers on this panel.
На этой панели. И очень приятно, в первую очередь, потому что вот профессор Интровидне, он как бы четко обозначил позицию американской как бы науки только что, где религия — это кто есть кто, а не что есть что.
And it's also it's a pleasure to be in this panel because just right now, Professor Massimo Introvigne, he straightforwardly outlined the position of American science on this topic that, a clear-cut definition of how do they approach religion and a subculture.
И как бы с моей точки зрения подходить таким образом категорически нельзя к вопросу.
In my viewpoint, it is unacceptable to approach these questions in this manner.
Если мы классифицирующим признаком выделяем образ жизни, то в таком случае любая религия, глубоко верующий человек, он тоже превращает свою веру в образ жизни. Это в чем разница тогда?
Because if we take a look at a lifestyle as a very important part of subcultures, then it becomes unclear, because when it comes to religion, religious people also have their own lifestyle. They transform their religious beliefs into a lifestyle.
Да, и поэтому я всегда удивлялся позиции американской науки, которая как бы всегда говорит, кто есть кто, но не говорит, что это такое.
So for me, it was always surprising to look at the approach of American science on these topics, because they always define who is who, but they do not define what is what.
И как бы вот позиция эта, она как бы понятна, то есть это политическая некая установка в науке.
On the other side, it is understandable because it's a political tenet in science.
Да, а если уж я имею право определять, кто есть кто, то уж, конечно, я могу определить, какая культура или субкультура маргинальная, какая уж нет, на мое собственное усмотрение.
And certainly, if the establishment or people that are basically leaders in that field, if they can determine who is whose, and certainly they will be able to set the criteria and tell which groups are marginal and which are not.
То есть я считаю, что это основная проблема науки, которая сегодня существует.
And Dr. Maltsev says in his viewpoint, this is one of the most problematic parts of academia for today.
И, в общем-то, когда мы говорим о субкультуре, нам нужно видеть классифицирующим признаком не стиль жизни, а самоорганизацию.
And when it comes to subcultures, I believe that the main classifying parameter of it should not be a lifestyle, but the thing that it can self-organize, that subcultures are self-organizing bodies.
То есть я думаю, что любая религия сильно завидует любой субкультуре.
I believe that any religion is extremely jealous of any subculture.
Это шутка, конечно.
Certainly, this is a joke.
Да, но как бы я думаю, что в этой шутке есть только доля шутки.
But I do believe that there is only partially it's a joke.
И когда мы говорим об этой доле шутки, мы говорим о том, что религии нужно прилагать неимоверные усилия для того, чтобы себя организовывать.
Here's what I mean by that. Because when it comes to religions, those institutions, they have to exert a huge amount of effort to make it organized.
Нужно содержать целый аппарат, а в некоторых религиях даже радикальный аппарат для того, чтобы заставить верить человека в эту религию.
Because religions, they have to maintain and support huge apparatus, and in some cases radical apparatus, to make people believe in what they believe, to keep them in that state.
С другой стороны, субкультура не нуждается ни в каком аппарате организации.
On the other side, when we speak about subcultures, they do not need that apparatus of organization.
То есть она возникает механизмами синергии, то есть самоорганизации.
Because the way subcultures originate, it is the mechanism of synergy. It's self-organized system.
Да, и, в общем-то, для того, чтобы не занимать много времени, мы могли бы как бы сказать, что любая субкультура, она оценивается по степени эффективности жизни ее как бы членов, а не по приверженности к той или иной идее.
And in order to keep my speech short, I would like to say in the conclusion that any subculture is judged, is evaluated based on the quality of its adherents and not based on how strongly adherents follow this or that idea.
И, может, я сейчас скажу совершенно непопулярную вещь.
I might say something which is very not popular right
Но
now,
это факт.
but it is a fact.
Да, то есть криминальная субкультура Юга Италии имела в виду весь мир. Ей все равно, что думает весь мир.
For instance, the criminal subculture of southern Italy did not and does not care what the whole world thinks about it.
Да, но она крайне эффективна.
However, at the same time, it is extremely effective.
Да, и как бы итальянское правительство и все мировое сообщество не пыталось в центре Европы справиться с маленьким клочком земли, до сегодняшнего дня никому это не удалось.
And no matter how the Italian government or other organizations are trying to combat with a small territory of people in the center of Europe, all their efforts are just futile. They cannot do anything.
Да, и как бы сколько бы Папа Римский не отлучал от церкви Ндрангету и мафию палермскую, они, кроме как улыбки в его адрес, больше ничего не выражают.
And no matter how many times the Roman Pope extradite mafia and Ndrangheta members from the church, the only thing they do is smile back.
Да, поэтому как бы давайте как бы смотреть объективно как бы на вещи. Каждое явление почему-то существует в мире.
So if we approach this thing subjectively, then certainly we do understand that any phenomena in this world has its specific origin.
Да, И субкультура – это явление, которое существует независимо от нас. Хотим мы, чтобы оно существовало, или не хотим.
And when it comes to subcultures, it is that kind of phenomena which exists without basically us. I mean, it doesn't matter if we want it or not. It is just there in a self-organizing manner.
Да, и поэтому как бы и церковь, и религия, и другие явления существуют, ну, как бы без нашего согласия. Мы как бы, ну, к нам никто не приходил и не спрашивал, хотим ли, чтобы они существовали или нет.
Just like the church and religion, I mean, they do exist, I mean, on their own. Nobody came and asked everybody, do you want so that there is a this or that religion or this or that subculture?
Да, и поэтому раз они существуют, значит, они чем-то друг от друга отличаются.
And if religions and subcultures exist, I mean, there must be specific parameters that differ one from another.
И вот они точно не отличаются стилем жизни друг от друга.
And one is for sure that lifestyle is not the parameter that differs subculture from a religion.
По причине того, что вы можете даже не знать, какое отношение к чему человек имеет, когда вы просто на него смотрите, как бы.
So when you take a look, when you meet a person, you might not know what he adheres to.
То есть у человека из-за американского подхода в науке сложилось впечатление, что субкультура – это люди, у которых длинные, например, волосы, какие-то сережки в ушах.
Because most of the people, particularly because of the tenets of the American academia, some people have that stereotype that the member of subculture should have long hair, all those extravagant earrings, wherever he should have that very idiosyncratic appearance, which is not the case.
Это совершенно не обязательно.
And not necessarily.
Да, я знаю многих, которые входят в костюмах за $15 000 и выглядят как респектабельные бизнесмены.
I don't know a lot of members of specific subcultures that look just like a very well-respected businessman would do in a very expensive suit. You would never tell that he is a part of the subculture.
И вся проблема, которая сегодня существует,
And the problem that we have today
это в отсутствии методологии исследования этих явлений.
is that there is no methodology of researching this phenomenon.
Спасибо большое за внимание.
Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maltsev, for your speech. And right now, in the framework of discussion regarding the difference between subculture and religion, especially what are the specific elements that shape each institution, I'm honored to give the floor to our next speaker, Lucien Oulahbib. So, you're welcome to speak.
Okay. Do you hear me? Yeah? It's okay? It's a difficult question because the two interlocutors before me said a very grave response. For instance, it's okay, the religion maybe is a lifestyle and become a subculture now, but as you know, as Oleg said earlier, it's not just a theoretic situation, it's not an idealistic situation. And for instance, the subculture, as you said, maybe wants to be not just an audience, not just a public, but also become political. Like Oleg said about Sicilia, about the mafia, you have a lifestyle, of course, but you want the other people become like you. It's a problem. But it's very interesting question, but it is not all my point of view. what I want to say now is why the the main religion, like Catholic religion, for instance, or even Protestant religion, become a subculture, has marginalized in a marginalized situation. It's I suppose because inside the religion, Catholic religion, inside the institution, uh, the people who conduct, who lead this those institutions are afraid to respond at the realistic question in the modern society. Uh, they are too defensive, they are too in the just a reaction against the modernity, for instance, reaction against the science, for instance. The, we have we live we have a very strange situation. Uh, in a few centuries, the health, we are the center of the world, and now we are just a dust inside the universe. And it's too extreme. The science, the rationality, the art also didn't respond about the fundamental questions. It's why you have a fragmentation, very fragmentation of tendency inside the religion, inside the politics, inside the whole the situation. Even inside the subculture, you have not just one subculture as rock and roll, for instance. You have many tendencies. Um, uh, each each idol, each singer has a lifestyle, has a mafia also, an organization, etc. You have about this fragmentation of the society. Uh, I suppose it's necessary to the religion, to the people who believe at the necessity of the religion. It means the necessity of the ground, a referent, not just a representation, but a very strong symbolic system to organize the life. It's necessary to not afraid about to respond, for instance, in the cosmology question, about psychology question, about lot of sort of questions. And now we have just very limited question. For instance, the, the religion, as I said earlier, is very shiny, very timid, very afraid, uh, and also uh, the religion refuses, for instance, to say at the science you have not all the response, all the answer of the fundamental question. Uh, it's why we can observe, we can analyze a common ground to to reflect, to have some reflection, very true reflection, and to finish the first reflection, I suppose all the lifestyle have it's necessary for all this to have a reference, like a referee, if you want. And if you have not capacity to build a common, like a universal background, you have the war in the hand. You have the war between the subcultures. That's why it's very important question now, because the fragmentation of the society is very deep, and it's necessary to have a reflection about it. Thank you for
Thank
the
you, Professor Oulahbib. Thank you. So by this, please, let me give the floor to our next speaker, Professor Ludmila Filipovic. You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. It was nice to see everybody here in the frame of new conferences. And I think that we became a good friends because we have possibility to share our ideas and even our methodologies. But I am agree with Professor Maltsev that till now we only describe the phenomena, but not have yet the methodology of this research. And today, as I understand, we try to find this methodological basis for difference, for differ subculture and religion. As I understand, before my previous acquaintance with this area of knowledge, I even find a list of subcultures in Wikipedia, and I try understand what is the basis for the inclusion or exclusion of some phenomenon which is marked like a subcultural. For example, we could find there different movements, different societies from different sphere of our life. And I has found only one representative of religion here. This is Amishi, the religious group in America. And I don't understand why there are no, for example, Mormons or old believers from Ukraine and Russia and other representatives of the religious subculture, because they belong, as I understand, to the subculture of the world. And I think that science has not answered this question exactly and clearly. What is the difference between subculture and religion? Because I think that the elements that shape each institution is the same. Very, very close and very the same. This is the system of worldview. This is a system of ritual activity. This is a system of behavior and many others. And I think that we could find a more common things, not that a different one. And for me, what is very, very common for subculture and for religion, this is mechanism, algorithm of their occurrence. I think that this is the same for religion and subculture. Maybe the reason of the appearance and motives are different, but the algorithm of their occurrence is the same. And we could find the different reasons and different motives. For example, to improve the doctrines, or maybe they change the leadership, or, например, seize power, or raise the welfare for the community, to be rich, or something else, very, very close one another. What is the common thing for religion and for subculture? This is like a specific system of view. This is a specific system of ritual activity, but it is not enough to confess something in common, because all subculture, it needs to be presented, it needs to be revealed, to demonstrate, to manifest them itself, as I understand. And I'm not sure that for religion it's necessary, but subcultures, this is a communities consisting of people who share common experience. I think maybe this is the dominant word to describe this difference between religion and subculture. Because for religion it's not necessary, because you have your directly connection with God, and you need not maybe for many of these religions this common experience. As I understand, we could say as a general, not every subculture is a religion, but every religion, especially at its origin, is a subculture. I'm not sure that this is the last point in my understanding this phenomenon, but I think that the difference, it's very difficult to identify and to find features that differentiate subculture and religion. Why? Because every subculture, the most secular even, can acquire the characteristics of religion: worship, confession, belief in supernatural nature of a phenomenon or person, the sacralization of purely secular things, giving earthly things the qualities of the universe. There is also a religion, a religious minority, a sect separated from the main religion, which was cut off, excommunicated from the mother's body, or by a council decree recognized as a heresy, or decision on the head of the church. So we could continue our research on subculture and religion, and maybe we could find the difference between these phenomena, or maybe we need not. Maybe need not.
Okay, thank you so much, dear Professor Ludmila Filipovic. Thank you for your speech. And right now, in the flow of discussion, shaping the differences between the religion and subculture institutions, I'm honored to give the floor to our next speaker, Paul Rhoads. So please, you're welcome.
Yeah, well, it's very important, if one wants to understand something and study it, to use the right words. The word culture has a tremendous prestige, which comes to us beginning with Hegel and then with Heidegger, who gives the idea another approach. In any case, I won't go into that, but what happened in the 40s and 50s in America was that this tremendously prestigious concept started being used by academics to identify different groups in society. So there was, say, the culture of criminal gangs. And now everybody wants to be a culture. Everything is a culture. You have the culture of matchbox collectors, and you have the culture of, every possible thing. But is there anything in common between the mafia of southern Italy and say the so-called subculture of people who are fans of a certain pop singer. I mean, it's a totally different thing. I don't know. The idea of a culture is something, you know, you could say it gives itself its own rules, but Heidegger's idea is that it's this interior, you know, it's like your blood. It's what makes you live. It's that way of understanding things and seeing things, which allows you to distinguish the world, which allows you to differentiate good from evil. And if that kind of use of the word culture is useful or meaningful, you know, you can't start comparing hippies and you know, Al Capone's gang in this way. You have to look at these things for what they are. So I think using the word subculture in this way makes it difficult to understand, as Lucien says, our very divided society. It gives every little segment of the divided society a certain kind of stature and makes them in a certain way equal one to the other. Not, you know, obviously some so-called subcultures are very small and some are very big, some are very influential, but metaphysically, ontologically, each culture has a kind of status. And that concept fouls up any kind of coherent thinking about these different groups. It's just, you know, some little subculture of people who, I don't know, collect buttons or something. It just has no importance in the problem of studying our society. Now, religion, my view of religion is that it's fundamentally a metaphysical view. In other words, it's not a culture in Heidegger's sense of it being sort of this thing that allows you to perceive the world, but it's a basic way of understanding what life is. So there is a God or there isn't a God. No, the world is material. That's a metaphysical view. Heidegger himself called materialism a religion. So I would use the term a metaphysic or a metaphysical view. So religions are metaphysical views, and of course they decline themselves in terms of institutions, and those institutions do what they do. But behind the myriad of institutions that a particular religion might generate, there is this metaphysical view that is building it. So I think there's a problem. There's a problem of terms, and there's these metaphysical views and how they ramify in our society and in our time. And then there's these different kinds of groups which can be very important, like say socialists. Well, there's a lot behind that. I mean, they run together, they wear red scarves, they you know, and they try to exert influence. Is it a subculture? You know, I don't think those terms are adequate. But of course, the problem is important of what's the difference between what I would say these vast metaphysical views, which are, you know, what's called the clash of cultures, and then these different segments of our fractured society, which are now colliding and creating our situation.
Thank you so much for your speech. And by this moment, please let me give the floor to our dear speaker, Marco Andreacchio. So please, you're welcome.
There, no surprise as to who might be the last at this point. Professor Filipovic, if I'm not mistaken, yes. I think and here I'll briefly tie into what Paul just mentioned, namely a problem of terms. But I think that the professor who spoke about this fusion of horizons, if I may say so, a fusion of horizons between religion and what we're calling here subculture. I think this goes back to another term that might be helpful here, namely that of tribe. However, we don't speak about tribe here because as it seems to me, what we're speaking about in terms of subcultures is essentially a modern phenomenon that is parasitic on institutions. And that is a phenomenon that arises precisely because of the inadequacy of institutions, the incapacity of institutions to respond to human problems in an exhaustive way. Well, who might ever want them to do so? But now, the question was actually raised as to the origin of religion. And it seems to me that the professor who referred to this problem was suggesting that religions at their inception are of a tribal, or as she put it, subcultural nature. And so what is the difference between a tribe and a subculture? I would say that subculture is a tribe that exists in a modern world and is parasitic on modern institutions. You wouldn't be able to have the subculture of, I don't know, Star Trek fans without an institution, a government that allows for the flourishing or the demise, however it might be, of so-called subcultures. Outside of this framework, if you take out the subculture, if you take it out of the modern framework, I think what we have, the skeletal structure, what we have here is a problem of tribes. So now, Lucien had referred, if I'm not mistaken, to a factor that is not insignificant here, namely that the desire, as it were, on the part of the elements of subcultures or subcultures themselves to stand for something universal. They don't just want to speak about, some of these people, they don't want to just play their game. They want to go around and tell other people to join the club because their subculture is better than others' subcultures. So I think that this is a human thing, that there is no subculture, in other words, no lifestyle, no group. But I think this is, it goes nowhere if we just remain within the modern bubble. We have to go back to the problem of tribes, okay? Because otherwise we're playing games. Otherwise we pretend that there's no regime, that no institution, government, that allows for these subcultures to play and to each one to have its own place. In reality, the human being as such has a desire for universality. So in other words, the tribe will have, at some point or another, will appeal to a principle in virtue of which, it feels legitimized in standing above others. Now, Professor Introvigne, if I'm not mistaken, had referred to, I think, a similar problem. I don't think it's a question, the difference between the two is to be understood simply in institutional terms. In other words, one has authority, the other one doesn't. You see, this is a pretty gruesome materialist and how should I put it? Sort of flattening out view. Yeah? One has power and doesn't, well, the other one doesn't. There has to be at some point a difference, an ontological, metaphysical difference. One stands for something universal. The other, in the other group, they're just playing cards, and they're the ones who play cards. It's okay, and they exist as lifestyles within a broader reality, which has universal claims. It speaks of justice. This is the path. Within that path, you're allowed to play cards, have fetishes. Fetishes is another point, yeah, because in the modern context, a lot of this is fetishistic. But you cannot tell me that the Orthodox Church of Russia is a group of fetishists. Only a fetishist would say something like that or believe that. They stand for something universal, whereas the fetishist who goes to an S&M club, okay, he has a lifestyle, but that's just a fetish. Now, who would ever say that you can reduce religion to a fetish? In other words, that, the Hebrews had their little fetish and they wanted to justify it, and so they got authority to do that. They gave it the force of an institution of law, and now we're justifying our fetish, and we're better than the other fetishists. Now, to return to the problem of tribe, so I think that it would be helpful to go back to the tribe. This is a big problem, but should we understand society as rooted in tribalism? So groups, tribal groups, and tribal warfare, and trying to appeal to a universal just as a justification to settle the wars, the conflicts, so that the universal becomes a super fetish used to settle problems. Now, all of a sudden, according to this view, religion would be a, big universal religion would be really at its heart, at its core, in its inception, its nature would be that of a tribe. I don't think this is adequate. Partly because it is a view that presupposes a lot that it doesn't acknowledge. It presupposes a universality that then, then it's a cannibalistic argument. Yeah, it's self-contradictory. This goes back then to the problem of universals. What is really universal?
Dear Professor Andreacchio, I hate doing this. I hate interrupting you. However, we're out of limit. Have you finished your speech? I got it. Okay, thank you so much. This was the first part of our conference discussion, and I think it's high time we've started our second part. So the second question is as follows. We're going to speak about the use of the religion by the other social institutes, likewise business, politics, etc., for their own purposes. We're going to speak more about religion transformation. I mean, from divine transcendence to the universal society based on contemporary techno-ideological principles. And for that part of our panel discussion, I'm giving the floor to Massimo Introvigne. So please, Professor, you're welcome.
Yeah, let me thank you for this interesting discussion about subculture, and thanks to Marco for having connected it with the theme of tribes, which was introduced in the European debate by Michel Maffezoli, and I had several discussions and conferences with him. Just let me answer Dr. Maltsev to the effect he's totally right when he says that it's ridiculous to regard a subculture of people who have long hairs or a strange face, but that's the beginning of the American study of subculture. In the 50s and the 60s, it was called the Chicago School. And today, nobody studying subcultures in the United States will try to find a physical appearance of members of subcultures. That's old stuff. It has been abandoned long ago. However, what perhaps somebody else will disagree with, and surely the American scholars of subculture maintain, to put it in very simple words, it that subculture are small. So why Catholicism is not a subculture? Because it's too big. Joe Biden, the president of the United States, is a Catholic, and the conservative parish priest in Sicily is a Catholic, but they don't have a lot in common. They don't share the same habits. They only belong in a way to the same institution, but they don't really share the same culture. Catholicism is just too big. And subculture, what the American school of studying subculture maintain, is subculture are minorities. They are comparatively small. If a reality is too big, it's not a subculture. We can agree, disagree, these are just labels, of course. But that introduces us precisely to the second question. And first, we should decide what is religion. And there is an enormous debate about whether we can define religion. Recently, I was debating with people who claim perhaps we should even no longer use the word religion because we don't know what it means. There is a book about Judaism by my colleague Boaz Hus, a recent book arguing just that. Let's abandon the word religion. And my point is we cannot abandon the word religion, most of all for legal reasons, because there are laws and international conventions protecting religion in a different way from how they protect, say, philosophical opinions. So we still need the word religion, but back in 1999, I was part of a committee of the European Union to arrive at a shared definition of religion, and we produced a very nice book. We were complimented, but the conclusions of the book is there is no shared definition of religion. There are many. So to answer your question, first of all, we should know what is religion, and that's a very difficult question. But putting this question aside, I believe still what you ask makes a lot of sense because there has always been, but there still is in modern secular societies, a subtle interplay between political institutions, economic institutions, and religion. Let's give a very much debated example. And again, I participated in other webinars about this point, which is contemporary Russia. Some would say that the Putin administration is using the Russian Orthodox Church for political purposes, to generate consensus and to generate electoral favor. But somebody else could say just the opposite, which it is the Russian Orthodox Church which is manipulating the Putin regime to be granted certain economical and cultural advantages. And it's not only a Russian problem. One can say that Trump, which who is probably personal, not a deeply religious person, was manipulating the evangelicals to get votes. But somebody else can say that the evangelicals were manipulating Trump to advance a certain agenda. So what I will say and what I get from your question, it's certainly true that religion is used as a tool by the power that be, by political powers, by economic power, and is manipulated to achieve their own aims and to further their own agenda. But it's also the case that some religious institutions, which are large enough and powerful enough and skilled enough, sometimes religious institutions can also manipulate the political powers and other significant powers in our society to further their own aims and agenda. So it's a two-way process. We cannot say that poor religion is manipulated by the very skilled and sinister politicians or business persons. Sometimes it's also the other way around. Religion is in the role not of the manipulated, but of the manipulator or manipulative part. So it's a problem to be explored further. Of course, we cannot solve it in 5 or 8 minutes, but I believe it's an important problem of our society, which should be seen in its different dimensions.
Thank you so much, Professor Introvigne, for your speech. And right away, let me please give the floor to our next speaker, Dr. Oleg Maltsev. You're welcome.
Спасибо огромное, дорогой профессор Интровиgne, за ответ мне.
Thank you very much, Professor Introvigne, for your response.
Особенно мне понравился объем.
And I like the volume of it.
То есть, если что-то большое, то это точно культура.
The way American scholars basically define subculture according to its volume. If it's something, for instance, Catholicism, you say it's just too big to be a subculture.
Да, видимо, здесь коллизия языка.
It is probably a collision of a language here.
Да, потому что если возвращаться к формальной логике, все большое не есть культура.
Because if we come back to the formal logic, then everything which is big doesn't equal a culture. It is not a culture.
Ну, вообще, кто-то же должен на вопрос ответить, второй.
There has to be somebody who answers the second question.
Давайте я попробую.
I'll try to do that.
Итак, чем отличается субкультура от религии?
And so, what is the difference of religion and a subculture?
Я уже сказал, что классифицирующий признак – это самоорганизация.
As I have mentioned before, the classifying parameter is self-organization of the subculture.
То есть церковь организовывается, субкультура самоорганизовывается.
To put it simply on an example, the church is something which is organized, and a subculture is something which is self-organized.
И профессор Филиппович абсолютно точно заметила, что все религии когда-то были субкультурами.
And Professor Fylypovych made a very exact point when she said that all of the religions, at some point, they were subcultures.
И как субкультура превращается в религию, это не тема нашего разговора.
And the way a subculture transforms itself into a religion is not the topic of this discussion.
Да, а вот чем они отличаются, мы пойдем дальше. Дело в том, что субкультура формирует мировоззрение.
But when it comes to what are the differences, I would like to stress that subculture is something which forms, which shapes one's worldview.
В субкультуре можно проснуться утром в 9 утра.
In a subculture, you can wake up in the morning, 9 a.m.
Вы всю ночь читали книжку и в 9 утра решили, что это то, что вы искали всю жизнь.
Somebody might be just reading a book in the night, and at 9 a.m. he might just realize that this was something that he was searching for his whole life.
Я еще не видел ни одного христианина, который проснулся в христианстве.
I have not seen any Christian who was born into Christianity in a way that he woke up and says, "Oh, this."
а религия предлагает мировоззрение.
So again, a subculture is something that shapes somebody's worldview versus a religion, which is something that suggests or suggests the worldview.
А иногда и навязывает мировоззрение.
And in some cases, religion acts as somebody that imposes.
И чаще всего навязывает мировоззрение.
And most frequently, the way it happens today, religions impose that worldview on others.
Вспомните истерику в Европе, когда запретили крестить детей при рождении.
If we remember the hysteria which had happened in Europe when it was prohibited to Christianize little kids.
С юридической точки зрения это абсолютно верный шаг.
Legally speaking, that was a completely correct way to do.
То есть это нарушает права человека, в этом нет сомнений никаких.
Because baptizing little kids that are not conscious yet is something that violates their human rights.
А вот в Греции восприняли это как войну.
But in Greece, they perceived this as a war.
И какое количество судов прошло в Греции по этому поводу, ну, как бы неизвестно.
And we do not even know how many court cases were there because of this matter, that the baptization.
То есть потеря автоматической паствы для религии губительна.
Because losing automatically the flock is a demolition for a religion.
Да, то есть религия совсем не заинтересована, чтобы человек дожил до какого-то времени, до 18 лет, и сам выбрал то, во что он будет верить.
Religious institutions are not interested in the case that a person would reach 18 years of his life, become aware, and choose his own path. No, they're not interested in this.
Это долгая тема, я пойду дальше.
And since this is a long topic, I'll just skip it and move on.
Обратите внимание, что религия, она предлагает догмы, то есть они незыблемы.
Please pay attention that religious institutions, they suggest certain dogmas which are irrevocable, that are unquestionable.
Субкультура имеет правила, то есть люди между собой вырабатывают правила взаимоотношений между собой.
In contrast to subcultures, that have the rules that are agreed among its members.
То есть вы не можете влиять на догму, потому что она незыблема. То есть вам сказали только так и больше никак. А если вы не согласны, значит вы плохой человек.
In a religion, you cannot influence a dogma because it's just unquestionable. And if you question it, you are a bad person. You are not a pious person.
Субкультура, она как бы, в общем-то, вынуждена вырабатывать в режиме самоорганизации правила взаимоотношения друг с другом. Но эти правила не являются догматическими. То есть это не истина в последней инстанции, это просто правила.
In a subculture, it has to come up with the rules in a self-organizing manner that would regulate the interrelationships of people in a subculture. But those rules are not the truth in its last instance. It's not something which is untouchable.
Обратите очень важное внимание на то, что мировоззрение религии не должно быть эффективным. То есть это ненужная форма для религии.
Please pay attention that when it comes to the worldview of religions, it is something which should be always not effective.
Да, а мировоззрение субкультуры обязательно должно быть эффективным.
So it's something auxiliary in the religion when it comes to the effectiveness of the worldview. But in the subcultures, the effectiveness of their worldview is something which should be a must.
То есть, смотрите, когда мы говорим о религии, религии все равно, как бы, ваше мировоззрение, которое сформируется под воздействием догм, что-то даст вам в этой жизни или нет, это не имеет значения.
See, in the religion, they are not interested if the worldview that you come up based on the dogmas of that religion, if that is going to bring you positive consequences or not, it doesn't matter.
То есть, а для субкультуры это вопрос выживания, то есть это ключевой параметр.
In contrast, for a subculture, it is a key parameter because it is the question of survival.
у субкультуры, в отличие от религии, существует так называемая функция насоса.
And subcultures, in contrast to religion, has so-called function of the pump.
То есть субкультура постоянно требует как бы денег.
Because to be an adherent to a certain subculture, you always have to spend your money.
То есть вы вынуждены их зарабатывать для того, чтобы этим заниматься.
Meaning that somebody has no choice but to earn money in order to be able to continue his activities.
То есть в церковь деньги попадают совершенно иным способом. То есть вы там ничем не занимаетесь, можете вообще туда не ходить.
But when it comes to the church, you might do nothing. You might not even attend a church. And the way money comes to the church has a very different mechanism.
То есть большинство субкультур являются достаточно дорогими.
And most of the subcultures that exist today are quite expensive.
А это значит, что вот вас постоянно что-то заставляет быть эффективным.
Which means that there is something that constantly pushes somebody to be effective.
Ну, давайте возьмем субкультуры, связанные с экстремальными видами спорта.
For instance, let us consider the subcultures related to extreme sports.
Ну, например, погружение в воду с аквалангом, ну вот дайвинг, это же вещь дорогая.
For instance, if we speak about scuba diving, this is something expensive.
Да, но они как бы зарабатывают эти деньги, чтобы этим заниматься, и ничто их не останавливает.
But people that love doing that, they would find all the ways to find the money for that, so they can continue practicing that, no matter what.
Возьмите субкультуры, связанные с мотоциклами, с мотодвижением.
If you take a look at the subcultures related to the motorcycles, it's a very huge thing.
Там мотоциклы эти стоят от 40 до 200 тысяч долларов. Как бы.
A good motorcycle, they would cost starting from $40,000 up to $200,000.
Но они это делают, потому что они хотят принадлежать к этой, ну, как бы, культуре.
But people keep on doing what they do because they want to be a part of that subculture.
Религия никогда не создает дополнительной функции.
And as for the religion, it never creates an additional function as of the subculture.
И вот здесь этот вопрос очень важный.
And it is a very critical point.
То есть, если вы посмотрите на то, как сегодня люди учатся,
If you take a look at the way people learn today,
они не хотят учиться нигде, кроме как в лоне субкультуры.
people do not want to learn just somewhere. They want to do that in the environment of a particular subculture.
И вот эти навыки, приобретенные в лоне субкультуры, и называются дополнительные функции субкультуры.
And the skills that were gained in the environment as such are titled that additional function.
Вот посмотрите, с каким, ну, недовольством они ходят в университет.
If I mean, let's consider how many people are just incontent of their attendance to the university.
И посмотрите, с какой радостью, я бы даже сказал, азартом они постигают вот все эти вещи в рамках субкультуры.
In contrast to how happy, how excited, how motivated people are in learning something within the environment of a subculture.
То есть, по сути, на сегодняшний день субкультуры в мире являются центральной образовательной функцией.
In other words, in today's world, subcultures are the key environment, are the key basically place which is responsible for education.
А самое важное – это функция воспитания навыков. То есть, как бы, по сути, навыки нигде, кроме субкультуры, сегодня люди не приобретают.
And most importantly, this is something which is responsible for the skill acquisition because really, I mean, solid skills are acquired in the environment of subcultures these days.
То есть, по сути, вот эти навыки, как дополнительная функция субкультуры, становятся ключевыми для реализации себя в жизни.
These skills that were gained in the subculture as an additional function become something versatile in life.
Я вот, выступая на последней конференции, как бы сказал о том, что сегодня, по сути своей, бизнес, он весь построен на навыках, приобретенных в рамках субкультур.
In the previous conference, I have mentioned that today, when it comes to business worldwide, most of the skill side of it, I mean, the businesses are built with the skills that were gained in the environment of subculture.
Что касается нашего коллеги, который сказал, что субкультура – это новое явление, позвольте мне с ним не согласиться.
When it comes to one of our colleagues that said that subculture is a modern phenomena, I will not agree with this.
Это явление, которому много сотен лет.
It's a very old phenomena, which, I mean, it's 100 years of old.
И мы бы могли его охарактеризовать как некую стадию
And we might have characterized it as a certain stage
организации взаимодействия людей между собой.
of organizing intercommunication or intercooperation of people among each other.
Спасибо огромное за внимание.
Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maltsev. And by this, please let me give the floor to our next speaker, Lucien Oulahbib. So please, you're welcome, sir.
Yes, I suppose the subcultures, as we said, are manipulated now by the market and by the state. In the first perception, you can see all the subcultures as the kind of ambience. You are in the drugstore and you become rocker, and the next time you become punk, next time you become Muslim, Christians. Or it's not true. You know, it's not true. And it's not just a market, but it's also a market. It's not just a market. For instance, in France, when the journalists in Charlie Hebdo are killed by the jihadists, you know it's not just a play. And the life is not a video play. It's very serious. As Paul said earlier, it's a metaphysic question, it's an ontological question, and you cannot share the same point of view. And now in USA, in the university in USA, you have some intellectual gang like Black Lives Matter or like anti-supremacist. It's like a tribes, as Marco said, and this tribe wants the power inside the French university, American university. It's not just a genteel fashion. We are not in the fashion way. As Baudrillard said, it's not just a vast simulation. And behind this, now, you have the technological system connected with the state, and now the bad universal come back. You believe, like Machiavelli said, you have a good universal, all people consume the subculture, religion, you are in the market, all people are good, gentle, smile, Coca-Cola, Levi-Strauss, etc. It's not true. Now the bad universal come back. The state said you have to lock down, you have to are afraid about a virus, about the coronavirus, and it's universal. And you have to save your life, care, the big situation is very grave, the climate situation is very grave. You have the, the bad the bad the bad side of the state. Alas, is not the Dante conception of the state. The Dante conception of the state is the tool for the true religion, for the revelation. What is the religion? It's the revelation of the true with a big T. Right? You have the solution, the true is not after the death, the true is now. Now you have, you have, you have the capacity to become to live inside the spirit of the God now with Jesus, etc., etc. And also the other religion have maybe the other way, but inside the Occidental system, the Christianity have the connection with the state to say the universal is a revelation. But now, in the present situation, the church, Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox even, the church uh, give up the power at the state and give up absolutely the power and the state with connection with technology, as I said earlier, take the power because the nature don't like the empty the empty, and it's why we are in the nihilist situation. For, for instance, um, all people said universal is dead, God is dead, universal is dead, all the relativism is good, we are in the global market, you are just a consumer, and now you have to take care about your life because the virus is here, but you have the capacity to prevent this and give us your life, give us your life, and we are the doctor of your soul. And you are in the situation very bizarre because all the people seems to accept the situation of inferiority, as we said earlier in the precedent conference. We are all in kind of inferiority. All people are in the little culture, as Paul said, little subculture of the collectioner. But we are not in the capacity to be a full citizen, a modern full citizen, and to share not our conception. It's finished. We are in very hard situation, and for instance, uh, you have a lot of the big tech has Facebook, Twitter, as even Google try to shape our soul, shape our condition, and become a bad side of the dogmatic religion, if you want. And to finish, I want to say it's very we become like in the bad Middle Age. You have little monasteries like how academic Ukrainian academic now we have just a little space to friendly, have an open spirit, because all the world becomes a standard mind, and it's why it's very difficult to support that. And I suppose we are front of a very strong opposition, because it's not possible to let this kind and to be like some zombie to consume Netflix series, and it's all. It's not possible to let this kind of situation. Thank you for your hearing.
Thank you so much, Professor Lucien Oulahbib. And by this, please let me give the floor to our next speaker, Professor Ludmila Filipovic. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I listened very all our speakers, and I understand that I do not understand the question because I decided that I need to explore the using religion. But now I understand that we could not say about use. I propose to say about the relationship and even cooperation between religion and social institutions. And for example, we need to remember that church was originally engaged in business. For example, selling indulgence or some church needs. And if we remember the first politicians who were believers, and they begged the gods to help achieve political goals, and then they simply resubjugated the church in the of Caesaropapism or vice versa in the form of state church. Religion changed, that's right, but it never broke away from the earthly. Everything was perfectly controlled and influenced. Religion is transformed. I think that through contextualization, but not from divine transcendence. It is always in religion, if it is religion, and as a core of any religion, to the universal, which has always seen in any religion. It is not a question of transition, not of the change of divine into the human, but of the reasonable balance of divine and the human proper. I think that this is very important now, because we could not divide the secular and the religious life. These two very, very important part of our life, to find a balance between sacred and secular. And I think this is our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Liudmyla Fylypovych. And again, let me kindly remind you that we're speaking about the use of religion by the other social institutes, likewise business, politics, as well as we're speaking about the religion transformation, the way they are transferred. And right now, please let me give the floor to our next guest speaker, Paul Rhoads. You're welcome.
Yeah, to refer to the situation that Lucien described, I think that religion has been the essential motor of where we are. Specifically, religion, as I try to not redefine it, but to use the concept of different metaphysics. So very, very schematically, I think that over the last few hundred years, there's been a clash between, you could say, a Christian metaphysics and a materialist metaphysics that's brought us here. And the mechanism of this has been things like political parties, artistic movements, Cubism, abstract expressionism, the Communist Party, and these different kinds of groups. And what we see now is that there are remnants of Christianity in what we have. There's no reason why, say, the present universalist regime that we're living under should be so moralistic, or why it should pretend to be so much, in a certain way, so much about freedom. For instance, the business about gender fluidity is a very caricatured version of Christian freedom. There's nothing like that in China. No, they don't care about freedom at all. But there's this great push towards freedom and liberation and so on. Black Lives Matters is all about, equality and so on. So equality was something that was brought into Western society through Christianity to a great extent. The idea being that all people, in spite of their differences, social or natural differences, are all children of God. So there you have an obviously transcendent kind of idea. And now there's this, it's been transposed onto this very material level where, the equality results, and we've got to level everything out in ways that can be measured in human terms. So I see the situation again as a clash of religions, or a clash of metaphysical views that has expressed itself through these groups, which I wouldn't call subcultures, but which are organs of these different religious ideas that take particular kinds of views and so on. I mean, one could discourse about that forever. And I would introduce another concept, which I came up with thinking about participating in this colloquium, and that's the idea of a paraculture. And a very clear example of that would be contemporary art. Contemporary art is, just to define it very quickly, you have this wonderful, prestigious museum, and you walk in, and you're presented with a literal pile of garbage on the floor, and this is presented as art. It's in the same world. It's an evolution of Rembrandt and Raphael and so on. So it's all made out of prestige. It's all made out of fakery. It's all made out of lies, and it's been allowed to capture the prestige of culture, art, and so on. And it's used by the current regime as a kind of flag, as a measure. Those people who understand and appreciate and support this paraculture are worthy of being part of this great new thing. So there's this fake culture that's been created that's used as a screen and as a legitimization and as a divider to separate the wheat from the chaff. The chaff would be the yellow jackets in France, the Trump voters in America, the Brexiters and so on. And the wheat would be the people who believe in, green energy, who go along with the virus thing, and who are satisfied to sit in a little box watching Netflix. You know, there's an in pipe of this government money and an out pipe of whatever they need, and they accept this, and they're part of this new thing. So I would, anyway, the idea of a paraculture. But anyway, those ideas could be developed at great length, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so much for your speech. And by this moment, please let me give the floor to our next speaker, the last but not the least, to the scholar Marco Andreacchio. So please, you're welcome.
Hello again. Yeah, Abby, I touched upon several of these points that have been discussed here in my previous intervention. It would be foolish, it would be naive, it would be hypocritical to assume that what we're calling subcultures can exist on their own. What we're calling subcultures are not tribes per se. Tribes perhaps can exist on their own, to be sure. You can go in Amazonia and you'll find your tribes, and they will have no government that is manipulating them on top. But our contemporary societies, what we're calling subcultures, cannot exist on their own. So it would be simply hypocritical, I think, for intelligent people, hypocritical for intellectuals to speak of them as if they just existed and then they just helped each other, or, you know, somehow they just there. No, they're being directed, manipulated. They exist within a context. Now, there has been an attempt in the modern world, in the modern secular world, that is the modern project, to use religion to somehow produce a new world, to bring into being a new world, okay? Now this goes back to Machiavelli, for instance. You use religion to promote a new world. You will transform religion in the process, and it will turn into a new world. Now, Lucien referred to the fact that you're not getting rid of the universal today. You have these tribes, somehow, oops, it comes back. So everything is unified under a new fear, the fear of violent death, the fear of the virus that is coming, a new unknown God. Who sees this thing? Now they're speaking about variants that are undetectable. Gosh, talk about you know, the second time it's a farce, as Marx put it. But now, it is not fair at all to say that religion and the state use each other on an equal footing today. That's absurd. Today, the footing is singular and homogeneous. It is a government that is working with corporations. It's an economic structure that is manipulating all traditional institutions to convert them as fuel, to use them as fuel for the consolidation of the hegemonic regime, which is an essentially economic, anti-humanist, transhumanist, post-humanist, whatever you want to call it, regime, which in traditional terms would be called totalitarian. Now, I think that it would be helpful to understand this problem, to go back, and I think I will mention an author whom I think we all know. And I think it would be silly on our part to go along with Ivan Karamazov and dismiss the starets. And, you know, we might not agree with the starets. We might not agree that all nations are born to turn into finally a universal church. But one thing is clear: religion has not been imposed on societies. Tribes are originally religious. And there is a religious impulse in everyone. There are fears that have not been vanquished. At most, you can confuse people into fearing the fetish that the technological regime is offering us, call it a virus or whatever else. But people will always be afraid of something. I think this is crucial, to take the religious impulse of man seriously. But by the way, we don't have to make up the meaning of religion. Religere is time. It is the tying of the political tribe, if you like, the political situation, the human situation, to transcendence. It's an opening up of the tribal to something ultimate, so that you're no longer compelled to simply do what your father says, or what the ancestors said, or what your society says, or what Caesar says, or what whoever the Tsar says. There's something beyond. And religion is there to remind the Tsar that, hey, you can't just be a cuckoo. You are there to help people go that way. Transcend your authority. You are there. Caesar, the Tsar, exists by nature simply as a reminder, as a helper, shall we put it this way, to help the people on their way. You are there to defend their natural right, to help the victims of injustice. So religion is there to remind the state that it's not all powerful, that it's not the last word. And I think the author of Brothers Karamazov has something still to teach Americans and Russians alike. Yeah? The state left on its own will become a monster. And you need some institution to remind the state that it is not God, that people are not just little toys, each one in his little corner dedicated to his fetish. I like feet. I like red shoes. You know, I'm not a fetishist. The human being is by nature not a fetishist. We all have this inclination to the universal, to partake in what is universal without being fascistic, without being dictators. We love dialogue. Why not? But to pretend that we can all exist in our little corner freely, like little butterflies, and as if nobody were on top, that's simply, maybe for a 4-year-old would be okay, believable, but it's not real. That's the matrix. That's not real. Huh? Bon.
So I believe it's high time you've finished your monologue, right?
It's part of a dialogue.
Okay, thank you so much, Marco Andreacchio. Thank you for your expressive speech. And overall, by this moment, please, with all my heart, please let me thank for all the speakers, all our dear colleagues, experts, and guests. And it's high time we have finished the online panel. Soon after, the conference issues such as reports, video reports, online discussion panels will be published on the conference website. And then for the more conference collection volume will be published within 2 weeks period, and that brochure will be available to those who are interested. And by this, thank you so much again for your kind attention, for your participation, and see you soon. See you tomorrow on our second online discussion panel of International Interdisciplinary Conference, Sketch the Subculture. Thank you so much and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Bye.